What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of Sit Down Saturday, and today we're going to be talking about production, like what goes into production a little bit, just rudimentary stuff, nothing crazy, not a deep dive or anything. I am going to go into the numbers a bit. If you know me, then you know that the numbers fascinate me, and I just want to start throwing out some estimates based on a little bit of information and a lot of speculation. This one is speculation heavy, with the exception of two things. And this is in regard to third parties specifically. But before we get into any of that, we gotta get into some house cleaning. So last week, what a roller coaster ride X-Transbots put me through. So I put this video up last week in order to kind of like flag to other companies like, look, don't kick them when they're down. Like, let them breathe. It's better if everybody breathes a little bit right now. It's better if we let everybody live a little bit right now. Don't kick this company while they're down. You know, that was kind of the undertones of what I was trying to say last week with the Springer conversation. And what happens? I look at this Dr. Egg, and then I'm like, well, maybe somebody should kick him. And it's not that it's terrible, man. It's just that it's super overpriced for what it is. There was a lot of people that said, well, look, without the electronics, you can't gauge the price. Look, yes, I can. Yes, I can. And it's too much, dude. They could have made that for a lot cheaper. It's just a lot of money to dump into a Quintesson that's not even that great. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. A wasted effort, in my opinion. All right, moving on to Smokey. Had a deal with some bozos this week. How much I loved it, how much I praised it. Like, did y'all watch the video? Do people watch the videos or they just make the comment? Like, I said in that video, like, the articulation is super limited, like Fans Toy stuff has been recently. It's continuing the trend. I said that something seems a little off with the build of this one, with the assembly of this one, where I haven't felt that way in the past. I said that the ratchets felt a little weird. Like, I kind of picked this one apart. Pay attention. It's my least favorite of the Stunticons so far. I still think it's good, and I still think it's the best drag strip out there, but I do also simultaneously think it's the weakest of the Stunticons from Fans Toys. And with that, I think we can just go ahead and get started. So we're going to talk about this, and like I said, there's not a whole lot of exciting news happening out there. There's a couple things I want to talk about. There's a couple people I want to talk to and share that information with you, but right now, just some stuff that's been kicking around in my head, some speculative stuff, but I will tie this conversation into a Legends class figure that I almost had produced, or we almost had produced with Shattered Cast, rather, back in the day, and the kind of cost that they were asking, and hopefully tie that in and give it a little bit of evidence to support what I'm saying. I don't know that I'm right. I'd love for somebody to tell me I'm not and prove that I'm not. I think I'm probably in the ballpark. But if anybody wants to come forward, those who would serve, and give me all the details, the juicy details that I can put out there, I'll put them out there. I will tell you that I've talked to numerous companies. Nobody wants to share numbers. I've talked to distributors. They don't want to share numbers. People don't like to talk about the numbers, so I don't have a whole lot to go off of other than a little bit of information and a lot of speculation. So look, let's get down to it. And this is really just something that's been kicking around in my head. I've had the opportunity to do that recently because there hasn't really been anything kind of really big to talk about. So it's kind of been nice for me anyway to kind of talk about stuff I've just been wanting to talk about. If you follow Nerd Rage at all or any of the podcast stuff, like I've been fascinated with production runs since the beginning of this thing. I just am curious as to what this fandom is actually broken down into numbers wise. I compare that with views of like major third-party reviewers and how that sort of breaks down there number-wise, Facebook groups and all that kind of stuff, and just seeing that like, yeah, like a lot of people buy this stuff, but not a lot of people buy this stuff. Do you know what I mean? So those numbers have always fascinated me, but in order to get into that, I feel like I gotta break down where the numbers come from. And I don't have, hey, look, all of this is entirely speculation unless I say otherwise, with the exception of two things that come straight to mind, but we'll get there. I will say otherwise. So where does this all start, right? So it has to start with an idea. You have to want to make something. And then you have to get into the design of it. Now, the design of it is broken down into a number of steps as well sometimes. Some people do just the engineering, then they pass that on. I know MMC at one point had an engineer person and they passed it on to a person that actually sculpted it. Recently, in one of the comments, somebody said, you talk about sculpting like it's all hand done. Like, what I mean by that is the sculpting has gone into the mold. Obviously, there's not one guy there with a chisel and a hammer. But that step could be comprised of multiple people. There could be people that are working on just the transformation side of things, just the assembly breakdown of things, just how it's going to fit on the sprues, just like it could be comprised of a number of people, not to include the sculptor, who could be the same as the designer, or it could be somebody totally different. So then you have to create the mold, right? And hopefully you get that right the first time, so you don't have to keep doing that over and over again. And that mold is going to come down to a factory. Now, either you own the factory, which is going to be a lot less expensive for you, or you're going to have to lease a space in a factory or contract a space within a factory to produce said item for you. Cool. So now you have the production in run. So now your item has been produced, and now it moves on to what? Assembly, right? All the pegs that peg together, all the screws, all the pins, all of those things have to be done. It has to be assembled and put together. So now you have the actual product, right? Okay, so now you take the actual product, you got to get that into something, so you got to package it. So that has to go into packaging. Clamshells or styrofoam or however it's going to go. Baggies, sometimes those little dime bags that they give you and put an extra face in. All of that stuff has to be planned out. All of that stuff has to be budgeted. All of that stuff has to be worked out for final production costs. What else do you have? Box art, instructions, all of those things. Somebody's got to do that. Somebody's got to design that. Somebody's got to go through the steps of that. It's very challenging to do, right? We give instructions a hard time a lot, I think, in this community, but if you've ever done the exercise in high school where you had to write the instructions of making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you'll recall that it can be trickier than usual, or at least more tricky than you would expect. And then the final thing is kind of the shipping, right? Creating the boxes, packaging the boxes so that there's so many boxes within the box. It's like the inception of boxes, and then loading them onto a pallet, putting them onto a sea container, and getting them shipped across seas. And then there's fees when they come into the States or wherever you may be. Now, some of this stuff breaks down to the next step, right? Which is the distribution of said items. So how are the said items distributed? Namely, through sales, you might say. What type of sales do we have? We have direct-to-consumer sales. That's similar to what Planet Steel Express has set up for MMC on their website. That's direct to consumer. Allegedly. Tired of playing games. These motherfuckers. But they're not the only ones, right? Make Toys has sold directly from their website. They donated all that money to the forest fire stuff in Canada not too long ago with Inferno, do you recall? That was direct to consumer. Also, a lot of these companies show up at conventions. When they show up at conventions, they're able to sell directly to consumer. Then you have distributors. There's the big ones, BBTS and TF Source. Shout out to Agabus, he's become a big one. Then there's also the smaller guys that are kind of getting washed out these days, but there used to be them as well. Now, they're not able to buy as much as the big ones, so I would imagine that they're spending a bit more to get it. So how are those sales accounted for? Well, they're accounted for mainly through three things. Either A, pre-sales, right? Pre-orders go up. It gives the companies a rough idea of the amount that they're set to produce. Obviously, you can't count on all those pre-orders. A number of things happen, but pre-orders get canceled, etc., so you can't put all of your money and bet on black or red in that case. You have to just use it as a rough guide. There's also the crowdfunding possibility. We've seen Make Toys crowdfund with Seekers. We've seen MMC crowdfund with stuff, that Inferno mold, the third use of it or fourth use of it that they did, as well as the Fort Max, right, that didn't get funded. So that's a kind of cut and dry way of knowing, look, okay, it was funded, it was paid for by 27 people, so we're making 27 of them, or whatever the case may be. That's easy peasy. I wish, actually, that more companies used it and used reliable ways to protect our dollar. And then the other way is kind of the rollout of it, right? So when the product is actually released, they use social media to promote it. Reviewers get copies sometimes. That used to be a wider spread practice than it is nowadays, but that's also a thing. Some distributors will get it, and they do write-ups and all sorts of stuff. If you want to know the story on Tiger Tracks, that all came from a write-up for TF Source. I read that article, and I was like, oh my god, my Transformers collection just isn't complete without this figure. So I got the figure. It's actually a KO of it. And I was like, no, it's not. I hate this figure. I don't care about it, and I wish I'd never bought it. So now he's in everything. It's a rough reminder of me of not to get caught up in the hype, not to get caught up in the rollout, of which this was done. And to be fair, all it means is that TF Source did their job. Achievement unlocked, if you will. But all of that stuff is involved in the rollout. We've even seen companies do trailers. X-Transbots did a full-blown Apollyon trailer one time with voiceovers and all sorts of stuff. All part of the rollout. Now, there's secondary rollout, right? There's secondary marketing. That secondary marketing is inadvertent. It's a matter of circumstance. So I do a review, that's marketing for them. Even though they're not asking me to do it and I'm not doing it for them, it just so happens to serve their point. Even if I say it's not good, it's still bringing exposure to it. It's that whole no press is bad press type of mentality. The other type of secondary marketing is just word of mouth. So people start posting pictures in Facebook groups or on Instagram, etc., etc. They love it. They can't get enough of it, and all of a sudden people feel FOMO. And they got to get the piece in order to be part of the crowd, or they just don't want to miss out. They don't want to pay the late tax later, all of those sorts of things. All of that part is part of what I call the secondary rollout. So then the question comes in to the stock. Now, this first question to that is going to be, what was actually distributed? Was all of the stock distributed? Did they hang on to some of it to cannibalize for customer service reasons? There's companies out there that whenever they're contacted, they've always got bits and pieces lying around that they can replace for you. That means that probably some of the stock was left over just for that purpose. There's also companies that seem to reserve some of their stock until the market inflates, and then they re-release the stock to settle the market and also strike again while the iron is hot. Kind of one of those Bruce Wayne, the more you have, the less they're worth things. So if you look on the website and it's all, plenty of stock left, buy at your will, kind of people feel, I'll get to it when I get to it. Low stock, they act a little bit more. Sold out and now they want it. So enough people want it, you re-release what your leftover stock as a secondary run, boom, double down, pick up the money. Smart stuff. The only bummer about that are the purchases that happen between releases from people paying late tax on stuff that they didn't need to. Which is why communication on behalf of the company would be paramount there, to be like, look, another run is coming. We don't know when, but it's going to come within the next year or so. At least that would give you a heads up. You don't have to spend $130 on a $60 thing. Now, the other way is that everything is just distributed up front and then it's sold out. And then what's done is done. So that either goes one of two ways. It sells out eventually or immediately, but it sells out, making most people happy. The distributors are happy because they don't have to sit on any stock. The producers are happy because they have happy distributors that are going to probably buy more next time. And the majority of the fan base theoretically is happy because they got the figure they wanted. The only downside of it are for the people that didn't get in on it. And now they're upset because they don't have the thing that everybody sold and bought and sold out of. Then it comes up to, is it worth a second production run? This time with a lot less expenses because most of the work has already been done for you. The same goes into repaints. The other way that it can go is that distributors are sitting on stock. And at this point, the distributors lose, the companies lose, and the people win. Why? Because it usually gets clearance at a largely discounted rate. So now you get to get in on something that's basically the inverted late tax. It's the late sale. But that's a gamble too. You're betting on black or you're betting on red in order for it to pay out to your favor. If it doesn't, now you're stuck with the late tax and now the pendulum has swung the other way. But as a result of this, now those distributors will not be buying larger quantities of said product next time from said company, and faith in the company begins to dwindle. Now, rumors speculate about companies that have made smart decisions regarding this, i.e. Make Toys knockoff headmasters. Allegedly, the stock that they couldn't move, they repackaged and sold as a knockoff at a lower price point to recoup their money and liquidate their stock. So that's an option out there as well of how things go. And that's basically the process. So the question is, how many are being produced? And this has driven me nuts for years. And I'm going to tell you, I was contacted by a third-party company who has a very limited experience in this, but did produce a couple things. Can't put them out there. I don't have permission. But they said the average third-party runs are between 1,000 to 5,000 units, largely dependent on the popularity of the character. Optimus Prime or any of the iconic six are going to lend themselves more towards the 5,000. Runabout and Run Amok won't get made, but perhaps Octane would find himself closer to 1,000. Why so many Octanes? Probably because there's some sort of minimum standard order that's required for a lot of these companies to even proceed. Maybe not the ones that own their own factories, but for many others. So I believe in the rule of profits of 100%. That most of the time, if something costs you 20 bucks, somebody made 10 on it. Minimum. Probably more, but minimum. So let's play the minimums. If you were to get 1,000 pieces made of something that cost $125 retail, that would get you 125,000 divided by 2, which would get you 62,000. That accounts for the markup from distributor to your mailbox. Divided by 2, which would be 31,000, which is what distributors would clear on a given piece, putting the initial company somewhere around 15,625 on a profit per piece. And once again, we're talking minimum. And like I said in the beginning, I have no idea how accurate this is, if it's even in the ballpark. It's just something I think about and wanted to share with you. I will say this. When I was on Shattered Cast, we thought about doing an exclusive, a Shattered Cast figure exclusive. And we were going to do a Seeker. And we were going to have it be a brown Seeker, like deco-wise, and the name was going to be Storm, which we all thought was funny and appropriate for Shattered Cast. We reached out to a company, and they were willing to do it. You know what they wanted to charge us? $12,000. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, take care.